digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by James from Kukuda. Welcome back, James. We have the lovely Jeff from Starlight Runner back with us today, and the noob in the mix is Michael from Havas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you gentlemen to introduce yourselves very briefly and let us know who you are, what you do. If we start with Michael, since you are the new person in this mix, why don't you tell us a bit more about what you do at Havas?
Sure. I lead the digital team, look after technology and innovation. And basically, I work with the rest of Havas to make sure our technical deliveries and our digital platforms that we're building for our clients work and give them the best value for money.
Wonderful. And Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Starlight Runner?
Hey, I'm Jeff Gomez. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Starlight Runner Entertainment. We're a production company based in New York City that specializes in taking story worlds, the narrative universes of our partners and clients, and extending them across multiple media platforms. Basically, we're transmedia storytellers and producers.
Lovely. And James, why don't you explain the fun that you get up to with Kukuda?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kukuda's a specialist augmented reality company. We have our own technology. We also develop apps. What I spend a lot of my time doing as the client solutions director is working with agencies, whether that be creative agencies or media agencies, looking at how we can deploy the technology for their campaigns. So we're doing work with Havas on the media side of things. It's a lot of where we can go in terms of innovation and evangelizing about the concept and the technology. Really waiting for it to go fully mainstream. So that's what I spend my time doing, really looking at how we can plug it in a meaningful way.
Indeed. And of course, you have your own platform that you've just launched as well.
Absolutely. We've just launched our SDK. So as well as being able to work directly with agencies and brands to create apps, any other developer can come along, take our software off the shelf, and use it to create next generation AR apps themselves. So that's a huge step for us.
Indeed. So, gentlemen, now that we're all in one place at the same time, we were having a little conversation, James and I, because frankly, chaps, you were late to the call. But James and I had a little conversation about the notion that mobile acts as a connective tissue to all of these wonderful other things that we do and the other platforms and the other disciplines that we work with as media and entertainment specialists. And I would like to start with you, Michael, in terms of your thoughts on this notion that mobile is this connective tissue, where you see the future of mobile providing that bridge and that link between these other disciplines.
It's a tricky question. From my personal perspective, I think the term mobile, as we know at the moment, will change drastically in the next 5 years. I think the handheld devices we're all used to is going to move away from being such a handheld device to something that's more integrated into everyday living. What form that will take, I don't know at the moment. And there's a lot of speculation out there. There's quite a few materials that are allowing smaller devices to be built, like memory, plastic, and graphite. And I think the ability for mobile to become a bit more intricate, it's not something we pick up and use, but something that's just there and helps us as people communicate better and build connections. I think that's where mobile will go generally. So the term of mobile currently is based on a mobile phone, which used to be text messaging and phone calls, and then all the other stuff got applied onto it. I think what will happen is it will take another evolution where it becomes a little bit more integrated into us as people and the way we communicate. How that's going to happen, I can't specifically say. But at the moment, we're going down the route of mobiles are starting to get bigger again, rather than the opposite of what used to happen, where they were getting smaller.
I find this an interesting notion because arguably mobile has already evolved into where we're kind of going with it is with wearables. And this notion that actually the wearable does have access to a vast array of personal information. And we're seeing now these apps emerging for the iWatch and what have you that monitor our health and tell us what we're doing. And we've got wearable tech in the form of things like Fitbits and Misfit and all these other bands that we put on our wrists that are tracking our personal health. So it has become more of a notion that actually I don't think mobile means means phone calls to many people now. I think mobile means smartphone to most people. And within the context of smartphone now means an array of personal information to most people. And I'm interested, Jeff, in your take on this, because obviously with the experiences that you create and you build, mobile inherently has a role to play in that because of the portability of the messaging and the way that the story can kind of be taken beyond the traditional digital outlet or the physical outlet.
Absolutely, Tanya. One of the things that Starlight Runner does to serve our clients and our partners is that we keep track of trends. We're particularly interested in tweens. These are kids from maybe 7 to 12, teenagers and young adults. And I really think that touching on mobile in this context is actually vital. It's prescient and vital. We are seeing a shift unlike anything we've seen before in terms of media use. The smartphone is driving communications right now, including social media, the issue of texting and telephone calls, but particularly social media is simply amazing. I think of it this way: in order for us to make multi-platform recommendations to our clients and to kind of strategize how to extend brands and entertainment projects and socio-political communications to as many people as possible, we need to understand that young people are using the mobile phone as extensions of their brains and of their five senses. So we make fun of teenagers whose thumbs are flying and whose noses seem to be buried in those screens. But what they're doing is not simply texting their friends. They're using their mobile phones to tell them what it is that they're seeing. I think that's important and needs to be very carefully considered when developing content or communications to anyone under 30.
Actually, that's very interesting. It's a shame that Maxim isn't on this call with us, because I'm going to bring up learned helplessness again, and he would rant if he was here. But the direction that you're taking that in, Jeff, and this notion that young people, fundamentally, the mobile or the smartphone is an extension of their being. And there is almost a learned helplessness on the technology, in as much as that notion of we assume and we expect connectivity with our mobile phone. So the moment we don't have that connectivity and we aren't able to immediately send that text message or immediately get that information that we're looking for, be it directions, be it the name of a particular actor, be it, to post a photo on Instagram, we feel a certain frustration or a certain loss because of the assumption that the technology will facilitate this for us. And in many ways, we become dependent on this technology. A great example that we use in a lot of our seminars and events that we run, where we ask folk to take out their mobile phone and hand it to the person next to them and unlock it and let them have a rummage around in their mobile phone and ask whether or not afterwards they feel violated. And invariably, every single person in attendance will say, yes, I feel that's my mobile phone. But the reality is it's a device. It's a device that we have allowed to take over our personal identity. And because of that, it contains a vast array of personal information and choices that we make within the device itself. And James, I'd be interested to understand from your perspective, when you develop these apps and you develop these experiences, where this borderline of kind of personal choice and personal interaction with the device actually lies, because it's a very personal device now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've actually hit on something which I mentioned. We were doing some work with Transmedia about the cultural nature of a mobile phone. We talked about mobile being the connected device, but it's also a very emotional device. So I think that's something that you've got to bear in mind. In terms of it being a very personal experience, we sometimes create apps that users can download. We sometimes create apps that can be used in a public arena. Perhaps we'll put an iPad in store. When you're creating these experiences, you've completely got to understand the context that it's being used in and how people are going to feel about it. We hear reports that the big touch screens that you saw people putting in store, no one wants to use them because they feel exposed. They feel everyone's watching them. So there's a real emotional aspect to apps, the fact that it's a very personal device. But I also just wanted to pick up just a couple of things that the guys said, really about mobile in terms of the device and the usage. You know, Michael made the point about devices ultimately sort of moving down to wearables. We're seeing them get bigger now. I think I'm on record with you, Tanya, of saying ultimately we'll be wearing, contact lenses, and that will be the screen that we watch things through. So devices getting smaller, wearables definitely taking off. But then on the other side, what we use the devices for, communication, entertainment, it's becoming integral to so many things, whether it's, the measured self and, these mHealth applications. It's just becoming pervasive, more and more pervasive in everything we do. I want to change channels on my TV. I use my phone. There's nothing that you can't do, it almost seems, that your phone can't do. So I just think it's becoming more central to our lives in many ways.
I tend to agree in that it's become fundamental to our lives. Many of us can't cope now without a mobile phone. But I'm interested in going back to this point of Michael's, which is that we're seeing the physical device scale up and get bigger, and we're seeing the plugins and the kind of application of wearables and what have you getting smaller and smaller. And I'm curious as to where somebody like a media agency such as Havas might see the future of advertising on these devices.
I mean, the way I was trying to say earlier, the way I see it going, and like I said, it's anyone's guess. There could be a little kid somewhere coming up with something totally crazy that we've not thought about. But in essence, your phone becomes your almost personal cloud storage space, not something you're going to end up carrying around with you. The wearables you're walking around, they will be the things connecting and keeping you in content and contact with what you're seeing and what you need to do with your friends. The phone itself becomes almost a secondary asset. So at the moment, the phone is the primary asset. You do get the phone out, you do stare at it. I think a time will come where contact lenses, in-ear devices, phones will take over. Wearables will actually take over the actual phone device. It's still mobile, but you now got to spread across different arenas, communicating with different forms of applications. So, we've got iBeacons at the moment. You still need to build an app to have an iBeacon work with it. But there will come a time where the iBeacons will follow the same rules the web did with ECMA. Somebody will create a rule for Internet of Things. Everybody will follow that rule. Everybody will build stuff towards the same sort of supported platform. And then we'll really see what mobile in the term means. It's not mobile in the device. It's mobile in you and your movement and your ability. I think that's where it's going to go.
I am interested in this as a notion because in the world that you're kind of talking about here, there's a lack of screen because we're talking about a lack of device, right? We're talking about in-ear and we're talking contact lenses and things like that. So from that perspective, if there's a lack of screen, so to speak, where does advertising fit in that mix? Because traditionally, advertising is all about kind of getting in front of eyeballs, right?
It is, but advertising has become a bit more personal than it used to be. You don't really spray and pray anymore. You don't really create content and you just chuck it at people and hope it sticks. Most of the content that's being created at the moment, especially from the Havas group, is quite personalized. You're taking creative storytelling data and you're using it in a way that's personalized for the people who will see it. So most of our clients don't just want to buy loads of media space and then create, loads of traffic. They're more interested in, are the right people seeing it? Is it the right demographic? Are they responding in the right way? And I think with less screens, which is probably another 10, 15 years away maybe, but as more people become more confident in sharing their data and we have more protection from the government and other people in protecting our data, I think you will find a different type of mobile user, which will be somebody who's willing from birth maybe to share information about their health, hereditary problems, traffic, the whole lot. At the moment, we're having to download apps to do that. But there will come a time where it will all get centralized. It's like going back 20 years with Netscape and Microsoft. It's the same thing. The Gecko engine got centralized, and 20 other browsers scroll up. It'll be the same. Once someone centralizes what the Internet of Things is and how it works and what platforms it should follow and keep it open, I think we'll see wearables will come in, not just watches, but clothes. We've got memory plastic. You can build things. 3D printing is a big thing at the moment. People building cars from it. So you can imagine what the potential of the term mobile will mean. I don't think it'll be a phone.
I tend to agree in as much as I think the physical device itself will become slightly obsolete at a point in the future. But one of the things that you kind of touched on there very loosely is around privacy. And I know that we've had this discussion before, James. I'm pretty sure it was with you about the notion of privacy no longer existing in the future. So I'm not going to tread old ground, but I am curious in terms of your thoughts and views. And Jeff, I think maybe you can comment to this a little bit more than some of the others in the call, but there has recently been some comment about the notion that we have become slightly gullible, is the word I would probably use, in as much as we now believe most of what we see. So when we see somebody post something on a social media site and claim it to be, I think there was a really good example of a young man who supposedly was at Glastonbury this weekend, and he was being held above a crowd, and he was what do they call it, surfing, but he was in a wheelchair. And it was, quite an inspiring image of this kid who's in a wheelchair being kind of allowed to enjoy the moment in a way he wouldn't normally be able to enjoy. But interestingly, after a little bit of digging, it turned out that this photo was not of Glastonbury this weekend. It was actually of a gig 2 years ago. And somebody had posted it and commented and said it was from Glastonbury, but very few people checked. The image went viral. Hundreds of thousands of people shared the image, but actually nobody bothered to check the truth of the source. And it is this thing that I wonder about, whether or not people are a little bit gullible when it comes to content. I mean, we all go to Wikipedia, right? We all check on Wikipedia for information on something, but we have to remember that Wikipedia itself is contributory. It is not hard factual evidence of anything. It is people's opinions on a matter or a subject. Yet we use it very much as we would a dictionary. So Jeff, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
Well, we've been looking at this, dating all the way back to the Blair Witch Project, and whether advertising or marketing campaigns ought to create the illusion that something's real when it's not, and so forth. And what we've learned is that people don't take kindly to being tricked, and that almost always, 99% of the time, the truth does come out. We do figure out that something is shenanigans, and then sometimes that can bug us. So I think in the advertising and entertainment industry, we've learned that lesson and are cooling off with regard to creating stuff that can be potentially misleading or simply a fabrication that we're passing off as real. And in terms of hoaxes or doctored photos or things that are misleading that go up, it is now really fairly easy to check. And so these things, they can run their course, particularly if they're fun or inspiring or weird. But they do, the internet has this odd kind of self-corrective. There are enough nerds out there who want to know the truth so that these sorts of things are eventually exposed. And they're exposed at the peril of the perpetrators in the first place. So we do need to be careful. No one wants to be the person on Facebook who posts something about the death of an actor who died, 5 years ago. It's embarrassing.
To say the least, I'm sure. So I suppose, James, from your perspective, when you're talking about this notion of mobile as a connective tissue, you have probably slightly more examples of this in action. And I know that you referred back to a project that you've worked on with Michael and the team at Havas. And I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to name brands, but would you like to explain to me why you felt this was a really great example of mobile as connective tissue?
Yeah, we didn't actually work ultimately on the project with the guys, but we were kind of talking about it in the early stages. It's really the idea of using the mobile phone as a companion device. So the idea is it was a campaign for Durex, the makers of the condoms, and the idea was that whilst you're watching on TV or you're watching the ad on YouTube, you get an element of, let's just call it, safe content. But what you can do on the mobile, which as we've said is a more intimate device, it's a personal device, you can then show perhaps, let's just say, slightly more risque content on the mobile. So it was, for me, this was a great melding of a great creative idea that relied and worked with the technology. It wasn't just taking a creative idea and trying to throw it down a mobile channel. So the idea was you could be watching something on TV and then getting a secondary supplementary story alongside on your mobile device. Michael, I hope I've done your campaign justice. Please do correct me if I missed anything out there.
It's correct. The reason when we first thought about it creatively wasn't so much to block people on normal TV from seeing the more steamy content. The reason was because of the rules around watching adverts with certain types of, too much skin or whatever, sexual products. We started thinking about it creatively, and we thought, how about we create an experience that isn't just about, showing sexy stuff, but also about telling a story from a different angle. So we call it From Behind Closed Doors. So the idea is you can see what the consumer feels and the way they behave to the product, as well as the delivery man, which you see on the TV advert. So that was the idea behind the Explore project, which is what it was called. And after that went live, it did really well. And actually, we then did an experiment on a radio in the car, and we had a radio channel play. And if you had the phone with you, the app would activate and show you what was happening in the radio. And actually, that did even better than the TV, and actually won an aerial award for it. So it's a really good way that a user is able to experience a radio ad or experience a TV ad from a totally different angle, rather than having to go off and then try and find the uncut version or the extended version of the ad, which is kind of the old way of doing it. You have a 20-second, you really like it, it's shown during the Super Bowl, and then you have to go on YouTube and find the 90-second version. The app can give you the 30, the 90, or the 60 version, depending on what sound it picks up or what screen you're looking at. And it can do it with visuals, stills, and ambient mute sounds, which is stuff you can't hear, basically. It's a very cool way. I still think the tech is still a bit far behind than what's possibly possible, which is why I like the iBeacons thing, because I think the ability for your phone or your device to be picking up content you've approved as you move through space is a brilliant thing. And it doesn't always have to deliver it live. It can store it in your hub. And when you go home and you're ready to consume it, it will know the best time for you to consume. And for me, I think that's where content, mobile, human connectivity will go.
Brilliant campaign. The one thing that sticks out in my mind, aside from how interesting it is as a brand, and I didn't ever expect we'd be discussing Durex on Digital Jam podcast. Thanks, James. But the one question that's resounding in my brain is, did your app have a way of being able to tell if somebody was actually in a moving vehicle? Because if they were listening to a radio advert and then it pops up with content whilst they're driving, that is questionably, dangerous to their health. Was there something that was tracking the way that people were moving with their device?
Yeah, it's got a gyro on it, so it can tell if you're moving or if it's tilted. And the idea, I think, as well, on the radio ad, it wasn't really aimed at car drivers, but most of the people who responded to it were in cars, yeah.
That's what I thought. It's the worst thing that somebody could get pulled over for is, oh, by the way, I was just checking this advert for Durex whilst driving.
Well, I don't think that would happen, because that's the same as getting a text message.
Yeah, okay.
Or WhatsApp message or a retweet, and having to look at the retweet rather than drive the car. I think, yeah.
Yeah. One should have their focus entirely on the driving at that moment in time. But definitely an interesting use of the technology. And you've mentioned this a couple of times now, Michael, so I'm going to take the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper with this, with the iBeacon technology. Now, personally, I have found that there are very few really interesting and purposeful case studies or use cases of things like geofencing and iBeacon combined. I find that at the moment people are doing it because they can, not necessarily because they should. And I'm curious in terms of your view on what would make an ideal use case scenario for iBeacon, potentially with something like geofencing combined.
Okay, so a really simple way that this thing could really work is hospitals. I mean, if you imagine you go into a hospital, if you've got a small scratch, you can sit in an accident emergency for a good hour or two. Now, wouldn't it be great if those things were stored with the types of information you would normally get from the people who would help you? And you know it's been created by the people who would help you, but you're able to get that information while you wait, and it could actually cut the time down. Now, if you could then link that back to the prescription table and to your doctor's referrals, you cut down waiting times really easily. There's a lot of people who go into A&Es and don't need to be there. But for fear, and you know the way the world works, everything on the internet, you Google a scratch on your hand and it'll say, you're going to die in 5 minutes if you don't go to the hospital. So the ability to actually get to the hospital, but then for the hospital or the surgery to actually give you trustful information without you having to talk to a human, I think it's a really, really potential way. At the moment, it's all a bit gimmicky. You've got to download a specific app to use a specific beacon. Going back to what I said earlier with Internet of Things, I think once somebody puts it down and creates a framework and a rules that shows how Internet of Things work, not Facebook building their own version and Google building their own version and Apple building their own version and everyone's fighting everyone like it used to be. Once everyone's working on the same rules, I think the world will see a much faster growth in the way beacons start to work. Because then you can build your app, and you know your app will work with somebody else's app and somebody else's beacon, and you can share information across. You can feed each other's beacons. You can feed each other's phones. I think that will make things much easier. So that's a really simple way you can get beacons to work.
Okay. So, Jeff, from your perspective, do you have any examples of campaigns that have used things like iBeacons or geofencing technologies in the context of your campaign?
Because we are a little bit more, story-oriented, because we're interested in the experience that the audience is engaging in from an entertainment and narrative-based perspective. We can allow for our clients to use those types of elements. But I did want to add from the perspective of the unusual applications of the mobile phone, the notion that you can construct a kind of dialogue architecture between yourselves and your audience. An example of how we integrate technologies like beacons and fencing and this dialogue component would be at resorts, for example. Transmedia is used in real estate and in resorts, theme parks, things like that. And we're shocked sometimes by the fact that these places, which invite families to come and enjoy themselves, actually don't use Wi-Fi. They're not employing Wi-Fi over the entire stretch of the property. We said, have you ever seen a 12-year-old girl who is denied Wi-Fi? It's not pretty. She's it's as if she's blinded, and it's like being back at school, and that's aggravating if you're on vacation. So the activation of Wi-Fi and the installment of this dialogue architecture, think of what it can do. You are, with the tools that were just described, able to track a guest across the entire property. You can offer choices and solutions via various applications or even messaging to the guest. You can furnish tools to occupy them while they're on queues, while they're on lines, and you can advertise what's going to be happening as if there is a kind of permanent audio-visual communications line between yourself and the guest. You can track certain guests based on certain demographics and direct them in the way that you would allow for the ease of traffic flow through a property. And finally, mobile is a story delivery system. When you have broadband Wi-Fi, you're able to stream video to the guests that are enhancements to what it is that they're looking at, or augmented reality, for that matter, through some kind of app. So it's the complaint against all of this, of course, is often initiated by the parents. Well, we want our kids to experience reality. We want them to enjoy what's here in front of them. So no, we don't want them to be using their mobile phones. And our response is, you're stabbing your kids in the eyes. You've got to give this to them, because it is the way that they are helping themselves to perceive the world. It isn't just about cutting themselves off. It's about sifting through information so that they are in tune with their environment. Believe it or not, this is what we've come to discover.
It is interesting that you kind of bring this one up, because I know that we have a mutual client in the form of Disney, or previously have both worked with Disney at some point. And one of the things I do notice that certainly in the US, the theme parks and resorts are now beginning to look at this notion of tracking their guests around the experience in many ways that you're talking about, giving them the opportunity to skip queues or giving them information, when they check in, etc. So there is, this new band that they can take around with them whilst they're kind of, at the resort. Interestingly, though, in Europe, we seem to be against this notion. And even if you go to Disneyland Paris, you will find that there is no such thing as Wi-Fi. So, yes, we're still in somewhat of a stone age in that respect. But, James, I'm curious to hear from you, in as much as there is a valid point here about the notion of access to Wi-Fi, or the access to the internet as such, and the limitations that causes in respect to the types of experiences that you can create with something like AR. Because I know that a lot of what you do obviously relies on immediacy and the experience in that moment. But if there is a lack of Wi-Fi, and to be fair, we're getting better at having this universal access to Wi-Fi, but it's still not entire coverage. How do you address that issue of people trying to use AR within a context of not having the access?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, as Michael said, to be able to receive beacons, you need to download a particular app. Exactly the same with augmented reality. I imagine it's going to be that way for a while. But the important thing you do is you look at the user context. What is the context of the user? And you hit the nail on the head when you said, what if someone's driving? If you're trying to attract someone when they're driving, perhaps getting them to download an app or use an app is not a wise thing to do. If you're trying to reach somebody in the evening when they're at home, they're likely to have Wi-Fi connectivity. You know what? They probably will download an app and engage with your content. If they're walking past a billboard in rush hour on their way to work in the morning, they're probably not going to do that. So you have to look at context, in the broadest sense, as much from the user's own context and what's the environment in terms of wireless connectivity. But to sort of add on to that, on top of what the other guys have said around location-based services, we're working on a few projects right now looking at museums. Now, what they want to do is to be able to deliver content about some of the exhibits. Now, you can either use GPS location or you can use beacons. Different technology. It depends on what's right for each application. But we're looking at using beacons to bring some AR content to life. You can also look at, for example, an app to engage users with a beer brand, for example, that tells them, using GPS location, there's a bar, it's 2 miles away, you can walk there in 10 minutes, there's a free beer there for you. Or you're engaging with a car brand, they can tell you that it's half an hour drive to your nearest dealership. So the whole location based approach, again, whether it's iBeacons or GPS, is another dimension that you can add. And that taps into mobile. Because it's mobile, we know where you are, we know where you're located. Think of all the different things you can do using that location. So I think there's a whole interesting area to explore, whether it's theme parks, whether it's museums, whether it's geocaching and treasure hunts, or whether it's advertising. I think that whole location based mobile engagement is a really interesting area to explore.
I fully agree with you on that one, James. But given that we are running out of time and we don't have time to get into that conversation, what I will ask you each, gentlemen, think on this one, is for your views on what you think is going to be the most influential or new emerging trend, technology, attitude, whatever that thing may be that you think is going to most influence what you do in the industry that you're in. And I'm going to start with you, Jeff, because you've got more practice at this than anybody else on the call.
Thanks. The aspect, particularly of mobile, that continues to truly astound me and continue to surprise me over the years is the fact that mobile applications are enabling people who previously had very little experience and even limited talent to express themselves in startlingly effective ways. This could be things like meme generators. This could be applications that make you look like a world-class filmmaker. These are applications that are going to enhance your ability to write something more cleverly, or to make you look more professionally made up. The special effects, all of these elements are improving by leaps and bounds every several months, and these are being integrated into mobile phones that young people can use to really make better content, and sometimes truly compelling content. So we're continuing to watch that closely.
Okay, James, let's hear your thoughts on what you think.
Yeah, as this is my third podcast, I may be repeating myself, but I'll do my best not to. Yeah, I mean, I think about this all the time, and what is the direction and where are we, and very much from an augmented reality perspective. Every day, we're hearing people say this is the future. It's kind of a few years away, but we started off being quite gimmicky. A lot of the things we've seen have been quite gimmicky, but the move is into things that are more meaningful. By that, it's using augmented reality as a visualization tool. So what does this car look like on my drive? What are these tiles going to look like on my floor? What's this boiler going to look like on my wall? What's this artwork going to look like in my house? That's taking it one step on from a little bit of fun to something that's really meaningful, that's something that has a real purpose, and something that really utilizes the technology for what it can do. The next step on from that is using it for commercial industrial applications. There are people, I think DHL are using augmented reality for their pickers and packers to, pick parcels out and to move them around the warehouse. When you can, with wearables, you won't really be doing it with a mobile device. But once you've got some goggles on and we can start to overlay content in real time, that's going to really be when it explodes. Whether that's a surgeon, using augmented reality to help with a surgical procedure, or somebody in a manufacturing plant or doing maintenance on aircraft, for example, having these digital overlays and this real-time dynamic information, that's really the future. That's where it's all gonna take off, I think.
Okay, so interesting. Michael, let's hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, like I said earlier, for me, the phone itself is just a device. And the way I'm looking at things, which is similar to Mark's way of looking at things, is where we are going with the term mobile. So whether we're storytelling, whether we're sharing content, whether we're building connections with brands and with having a relationship with our devices is the ability for that device to be part of our everyday living. So we've gone from laptops, which we carried around, to iPads, which we all carried around, to mobile phones. It's where that next leap is. And whether it's augmented reality or games or gimmicks or iBeacons, it's the relationship that we as a person build with the thing that's basically knows everything about us. And I think that's the bit where the advertisers and the brands need to start understanding more. What is the relationship between the person and the device, as opposed to what is the relationship between the device and the brand? I think once we get that understanding, it makes it easier to communicate.
Definitely agree with that. Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Before we depart, I'm going to ask you to just shout out for me whatever your Twitter handle is, or your URL, or your whatever form of connection that you would like our listeners to follow you, connect with you, or just hound you. James?
Yeah, you can reach us at www.kudan.eu. Kudan spelled Kudan. There's lots of information on there for anyone who's interested in AR.
And Jeff?
Hey, you can reach me through Twitter and follow me on Twitter. That's at Jeff_Gomez.
Don't forget the underscore.
Don't forget the underscore, the other Jeff Gomez. Not happy with me. So that's Jeff_Gomez. And on Facebook, it's Starlight Runner Entertainment or Jeff Gomez.
Okay, and just for clarity, the spelling of Gomez is Gomez. Yes?
There you go.
Wonderful. Michael?
Mine's very easy. I'm on Twitter at Magic Tuscan. Tuscan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, guys. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.
Excellent.
digitaljamsessions.com